This video presents a series of yoga poses to represent some continuous time Fourier transforms. The first one is the transform between 1 and 2 pi delta. One is represented by the warrior 3 pose, where you're standing on one leg, so the body is horizontal, just like a constant line on the graph. 2 pi delta is represented by the warrior 1 pose on each leg. Your arms point to the sky, representing infinity, and the width of the base can vary as shown on the graph of delta, and you do it on both legs to show 2 times pi times delta. The next one is between delta and 1. Delta is represented by the warrior 1 pose on one leg, and you just do it on one leg to represent there is no 2 pi in this case. Now we have a complex exponential going to a shifted 2 pi delta. The complex exponential is represented by eagle pose. Because E and eagle have the same letter, it is also an awkward pose that makes you take a step for the next pose. And the 2 pi delta that is shifted is represented by taking a step before doing the warrior 1 pose on each leg. Step forward represents the shift, and you do it on both legs. Cosine is represented by this pose, and then the Fourier transform gives shifted deltas. The warrior 2 pose is used to represent cosine because it is a very stable pose, and you can always trust cosine. The shifted deltas are represented by taking a step in between each warrior 1 pose. The step backward represents that you're in the negative values, and keep in mind this is for when W0 is a positive frequency. You will only do the warrior 1 pose on one leg. Sine is transformed into shifted deltas, however, there's also a complex component. We represent that by keeping one arm to the side, because the complex plane is orthogonal to the real plane. Here we have a negative delta. So a triangle pose represents sine. You can remember it because sine and side sound pretty similar. And the shifted deltas are represented by modified warrior 1 poses. They're similar to the regular delta, however in the negative plane you'll have one arm down to represent that the delta is inverted, and you'll keep one arm to the side for both poses to represent the complex. Now we have a sinc, which is transformed into a rectangle. The sinc is represented by the downward dog pose, where the highest point is in the center. The values decrease to each side. The rectangle is represented by the tabletop pose because your body forms a rectangle, as you can see with the graph. You can also transform between a rectangle and a sinc. Again, the rectangle is the tabletop pose, and the sinc is the downward dog pose. Now we put all of them together to show multiple Fourier transforms. We have 1 becomes 2 pi delta, and delta becomes 1. Then we have a complex exponential, which becomes a shifted delta. Next is cosine, which gives a pair of shifted deltas. Then sine gives delta and a negative delta. Then finally sinc becomes rect, and rect becomes sinc. I hope you have enjoyed this video and that it helps you to remember the different Fourier transforms.